What's up, everybody?
What's going on, everyone?
Welcome to the More Creatives podcast. I got Pete here. He's doing this thing with me. And then we have a special D'Angelo.
Is that what this is? I love it. It's great.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Love it.
So we brought you here to interrogate you.
I love it. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, to be honest.
So thank you guys so much for the support on the past couple of episodes and like the cool feedback on Instagram and stuff. I've gotten a lot of cool feedback. People love it so far. But yeah, we enjoy this thing. And Christian, thank you for coming. And we have some questions to ask you. So Christian is a video production. Oh my. Oh my.
Video.
Hey. That's good.
Wow.
Clearly he doesn't
So Christian's a video production, mainly post-production company owner. It's called Mechanical Heart. And he's been doing this thing for a long time. I've personally learned a lot from him. He's kind of taken me under his wing a little bit. But he's been doing this for a long time, and he's had some awesome people he's worked with and different things like that. So if you want to tell them a little bit more about what you do and what does it look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think like video production aside, in going backwards, you know, this really all comes down to storytelling, right? I think like since I was young, I've just always had such a draw to just kind of human emotion and just life and navigating that. And I think there's something, you know, so powerful. There's a certain level of like, hold on, where am I going with this? I don't like where I'm going with this. Back that up one more time. What was the question again?
Just tell them a little bit about yourself.
Okay, great. We'll go from there. Yeah.
We've already had such a thrilling conversation even prior to starting this thing. So I know our minds are kind of here and there. So, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the video production space, mainly storytelling. I think there's something so beautiful about storytelling and just really like as human beings, right? We navigate life, and as a storyteller, it's kind of our way to like take what we've learned and then do some cool stuff with it, and then like throw it back out into the world and share it with people, right? So, yeah, but I think like kind of going backwards, like I don't know, I've always had such a draw to video production. I think because I've always been like a relatively like a very technical person, but then also like have that draw to storytelling as well, right? And I kind of found across like all of the art forms, I found video production to really be the one that like has such a like high technical need as well as like such a high storytelling, like artistic creative understanding. And I just felt that like that was the best way that could kind of like marry two worlds that I felt like I just had a lot of like love and draw to, right? So I mean really from like high school like through early career, it was always video production. Kind of earlier on, like started in like where you show up with the tripod and you're the boom guy, you're the camera guy.
Can we take a moment and say, hey, one man band guys, we love all of you.
Yeah.
Because we've all been there.
No, it's like, I have the biggest respect for that. Cause like, I mean, that's where we all started, right?
Yeah,
because it's like, and it's like arguably the best way to learn the craft because like you are the audio guy, you are the editing, you are the cinematographer, you are having to light the scene correctly. So you have to know all those spaces and then, excuse me, and then kind of like hopping into a director space where then you are directing all those people. You can then speak their language because you've done it all versus just being the one pointing fingers and being like, I have no idea what your specific role is, but go. Like you can, can lead from that place of like, I've done all the things. Entire production. Like it's still crazy where it's like you'll like in the context of like big Hollywood, right? Like you have these like $200, $300 million productions and these massive teams of people and all that, right? And by the end of everything, you just watch it slowly funnel down to like the editor and the director before it goes out into the world. Yep. And specifically like these, you know, there's some directors that'll direct and edit. That's very few and far between, but like it's really, and you have assistant editors and all that, but like at the end of the day, like the editor is the final piece of the puzzle. Like that's the final stamp before this thing goes out into the world. And I think that is an incredible responsibility to bear. Yeah. And it also requires an incredible amount of skill and empathy and understanding what we were saying earlier, right? About the one-man band thing and understanding all of those, like there's so much.
You got to know like, okay, they're doing this with that shot.
Yep.
So it'll fit here.
Yeah.
And then like to have that, because you kind of have to have a storytelling like mindset when you're
absolutely
editing.
Do.
Because like you can just put everything in order and like, sure, it's an edit, but like it's not going to come out to like what it was meant to come out to. Because like, you know, so.
Yeah, I totally know.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, to go along with that, the idea of, I mean, we've all seen videos that have gone through the gatekeeper per se.
Yeah.
And you've watched and you're like, wow, all those transitions were great. Or those shots, they look good, yet something feels off.
Yep.
So you can have all of the technicality and all of the different things done, but if you don't connect the emotion, if you don't connect the mindset and where like the creative direction was going, then it's a void that we naturally feel, but we'll never be able to put our finger on it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, like the music side of it.
It's a huge part of it.
It's the biggest. That's the biggest part of editing. It really is, because like, okay, imagine a client being like, you create this awesome. You create this awesome edit. Right? It's amazing. You have awesome music. It literally just lines up perfectly. And your client comes back and says, hey, can you change the music? It's like telling a builder to change the foundation of a house. You know what I'm saying?
No,
so
that's hard.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And I'm really sorry. This is all I'm if you are not creating a custom score, the music is your bitch. And that is what you serve.
Okay.
Like that, like you are forced into what that track is doing. Now, mind you, once you kind of get into these like kind of like secondary levels of, or these more advanced layers of post-production, where at that point you're actually like really starting to like manipulate the track and like move it around and change things. You know, you get a little bit of that control back, but for the most part, like what you find in tone and with the music track that like you find, like that is like your whole edit serves what is happening in that track. You know, move. And then I guess kind of layer 2 to that is combining multiple music tracks if you're not able to find enough like tone shift in one track. So that's my other thing too, where it's like, okay, you may have a really tightly paced track, and then you know, a minute into your edit, you then tone shift to something that's, you know, a lot that breathes more, and then tone shift into something that ramps up again. I mean, I've done even like 90-second edits that incorporate 4 different music tracks, because I just like, I have like some form of like, my attention span is like completely jacked. I'm sure that I have like some form of ADHD, and like I cannot like I just cannot sit with like cuts that are not kinetic and that aren't moving. And like anything that like is a certain tone for longer than like a minute and a half, I'm like 180ing to some other feel. So even like I said, even my like 2-3 minute cuts at minimum will generally have like 2 to 3 different music tracks. And I think that's what keeps them interesting and dynamic, and what makes a 3 or 4 minute cut not feel like 3 or 4 minutes, but more like, 30, 40 seconds. Yeah. There's nothing worse than trying to drag yourself through something that's like 4 or 5 minutes long that feels 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
And often that's just what I've found is just a lot of it lands on poor music choice. You know, they'll just take this one track and like loop it for 5 minutes straight. And you're just sitting there like, I cannot sit through this thing.
So
like,
in essence, what you're saying then is maybe for someone who's watching today and they've kind of gotten stuck in that mindset of like, well, I've got this one track and I've got to make this track and make it fit the entire track. When in reality, you're telling us like, no, it's okay to break free from that.
Yep.
You know, really set your own foundation, set the bar for what you need. If you're going to do 4 tracks, do 4 tracks.
Yeah.
You know, I love that.
And obviously like, if you're going to do 4 tracks, like be very aware of your tone for what you're going for. Like, let's not like just randomize our tracks we're pulling here.
Yeah.
Feel that out. Right. And I think like to kind of backtrack just a smidge here, like editing is so much about empathy. Yeah. Right. I am a highly emotional person. Like, I feel like I'm constantly fighting like my own emotion. Like I just feel so much all the time. Yeah. I take things to heart way more than I probably should. Everything is hyper analyzed, every interaction, and this gets really fun when it comes to girls because it's just a whole different mess. And that's actually like, so, and I think that's why I found myself so drawn to this space, because what I found with post is like, and this is, I think, again, what like separates like the great from the good is like, you actually have to like, show them what they don't even know that they need. And that comes from a space of deep empathy and understanding for what they are asking for, what their brand is, what they're trying to communicate.
Right.
And then where it gets tricky is then you have to pair that with the high technical skill of like navigating a nonlinear video editor and understanding how to like chunk together arbitrary concepts. And so it's this like, it's technical and heart and this like beautiful blending of the both. So actually my production company name, Mechanical Heart, actually comes from that space of it's a deep understanding of precise technical mechanics blended with heart and soul. So in that sense, it's just black and white mechanical heart. And then the other fun thing is that I had heart surgery 2 years ago, and I actually do have a mechanical heart valve that's keeping me alive. So
wow.
I wanted you to.
So there's a deeper level of that as well.
I wanted you to get into that a little bit more. Yeah, like your story, like what's that like? You know.
Yeah, the like heart stuff.
A lot of people aren't aware of like what you're going through like to this day. You know, it'd be cool for you to like talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have a condition called Marfan syndrome. It's a connective tissue disease. All my body tissue didn't form correctly. So that's actually why I'm like the 6'6" tall and skinny person, because my body tissue is just formed incorrectly.
Okay.
It was a condition that was passed down to me from my father. He had passed away from it. He was unaware that he had it. Okay. And then through his passing, it kind of began my diagnosis and all that. So there's a lot of things with it. The big one is it affects the heart. And you'll have the main blood vessel giving blood to the heart is compromised and has this tendency to just explode and kill you.
Okay.
So you have to kind of watch it. So for most of my life, we watched that aorta increase in size, get closer to the danger zone. So in July of 2020, opted to have open heart surgery. They went in, saw a lot more issues than we had kind of anticipated.
Wow.
And they ended up putting in this mechanical valve. It's a piece of carbon that is at the base of my aortic root with 2 little flaps on it. If you were to like crank the audio on this podcast, you could actually hear the ticking from it. It sounds like a loud Rolex. Bro. It's just a little, it's wild.
Dude, that's like Peter Pan with the croc. Like you're always...
Yeah, literally. Cool. And it's so funny. Like, and the funny thing is obviously like people don't know what it is. It's like, even my cousin was like, for years I've been around you and I've heard this noise and I've always I'm just such a big proponent of everything happens for a reason. Like especially being someone that's following Jesus, right? Like there's such a heavy dependence on my life on a creator that is beyond my own circumstances. That's good. And with that comes the burden lift of, cool, I don't need to figure all this out on my own. Like there is a greater power in which I believe is the God of the Bible that is perfectly orchestrating every circumstance down to the millisecond. Therefore, I am just going to live life in these 24-hour chunks, and whatever happens not only happens, but is in my best interest because I'm a child of God, and he often promises in his word that he will take care of his children. So here I am, like with a heart that at any moment could end my life and a plethora of other issues that are, incapacitating me to the point where I'm just grateful to be able to be up and walk today. It's not something at 28 that I figured I'd have to be, undergoing, but here we are. So all that, right? And trying to build and trying to grow. I know that it's all like God has the timeline of it all, no pun intended. And all I really have to do is just kind of sit and enjoy the ride, while moving the pieces that need to move. Don't go sit in a corner and do nothing and just be like, oh, Jesus, like build. But, it takes a lot of the stress out of like, oh, I have to do all this.
Oh, we've already, I love it. Go for it.
But I wanted to talk about like kind of some of the people that you've worked with, because I know like you do like a mixture of, commercial companies and like different things like that, agencies, and then you also have like your ministry side. Right. That you do a lot. I know you do video editing for Calvary Chapel. That's how we met, and we are in that same space, but how do you navigate that compared to like the commercial side of things and like, because you don't want to lean too much on one side, and then you lose the other, like that kind of feeling. How do you, like, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, that would be sweet.
Yeah, I totally get where you're at, right? Like you want to be careful to like not pigeonhole yourself into like, oh, I'm the like ministry video guy, or like, on the other side of the spectrum, you're just so commercial that like you have this wall off to, the nonprofit ministry world as well. And like, I guess I've been in kind of a cool spot where I feel like I have a pretty good balance of both. And my personal opinion, like the ministry clients, are my absolute favorite. And it's kind of funny too, because like those are often like, they're mostly the lower technical clients. Like they don't require as kind of I don't want to say require, but the need isn't as great as far as like scale and technical intensity with the ministry clients. But I find myself like caring about those the most, because those are the Jesus stories. Like those are the heart stories. That's the stuff that I genuinely like, that just genuinely gets me so excited. And really like ministry was my training ground for becoming a storyteller, working at a church for 4 years, right? Having to learn how to, like within days of a Sunday gathering, pull together tons of footage for something and have a narrative that works, and on such a short notice and such a short amount of time, that's being shown to 2,500 people. And then like doing that over and over and over again, like was kind of the best like crash course in storytelling that like I've ever had. And I tell people, like, if you want to get really, really good at storytelling, specifically editing, like go work for a church for at least 2 years, because you have such a dynamic content need, from like live event coverage to like personal Jesus stories to the fun short film narrative, like dress someone up as a Bible character and, like make a narrative short with them, to like everything in between, live services, the intensity of live production. Like it could not be a better, like well-rounded way to like refine your storytelling skills that you will not get arguably in really any other type of like business type setup, right?
That's actually really good.
So that really was like such a massive foundation. And coming out of that is where I learned like, and again, like you'll always find the need comes back to post, always, because even churches, right? Like they are so much content is coming in that they're not even shooting, that's just coming in from all corners of the world. And there's just this expectation of someone to assemble that all and make it all make sense. So that's what I mean. Again, like you cannot escape editing. And like, I think it's so funny that people like put that at the bottom of the list, where it's like, they don't realize like it is the most, like at the end of the day, like people are paying you to be a good editor. Like you can have the most gorgeous cinematography in the world, and if your edit is garbage, like the last thing they're going to be thinking about is how good your shots look, which is where I'm in this hilarious spot right now, is where I've kind of like, I've lessened my intensity for like high concept visuals, because I can literally make anything work in the cut, and people kind of forget, not that I'm saying that I'm like half-assing like good cinematography, but it's just funny. Like some of my favorite things that I've cut this year have been like iPhone content that has been like sent overseas from like
share some of the companies you've done work for?
So like, I mean, I've done everything. The bigger clients that I've been able to kind of do some work with is like, probably like IBM, Facebook has been one, like companies like that, you know, are very large brands that obviously have a lot of needs, and you know, it's kind of just like through different circumstances and stuff like that, it's like, oh, I'm behind the timeline on this, right? So it's kind of like it's funny, from like the iPhone footage coming from Ukraine to like a $200 billion company like Facebook, and like everything in between, like I don't look at those any differently. Like it's all content assembly. Okay. And like one is not better or worse than the other. And that's where I just like I get so hung up over these like really pretentious people that are like, oh, I'm this and I've done that. And I'm just like, it's all cutting. Yeah. Like, so it's just, I don't know. I just like the ministry stuff. Like it put me in a really cool space to just be like, I found myself highly valued in the spaces that I've been able to work at. And I've often kind of been like frontlined to the larger projects, because within like a few edits being shipped, like people are very quickly able to determine like, oh, like we see where you're at. Yeah. Can we put you on this? And I think that's a testament to the question of like, oh, well, like, how do I get these larger clients and these larger projects and stuff like that? Just kind of like do good work, and not only do good work, but I think the better word is like, it's not excellence, it's consistency, right? I think it's one thing to like be able to drop an edit and be like, wow, that was so good. But then to like be able to consistently do that across different genres and different like areas, to like consistently have it work, is, I think that's where you're truly a professional, right? Yeah. Because you're like, and I'm not saying everything has to be like mind-blowingly, this is the best thing I've ever seen, but you're just, the bad projects are a little bit less, and you're able to kind of consistently turn stuff around that like, oh, this works. Or often my favorite is where like you're showing something to client, and this is, take this with a grain of salt, but like I've kind of gotten to the point of rule breaking now where like I don't really follow the instructions that I'm given anymore, because I know that what I deliver is actually going to be better than what the client is asking for. And I just take the risk of being in that space. Yeah. And that's bit me in the butt a few times, mainly in the sense of like, I just worked on a project with a client that like had a paper edit script, and they just, for some reason, were so dead set on me following that script. And even the agency that I was working with on it was like, Christian, like, we love what you put together so much more than like what the script says, but for some reason they just want what's on that script.
Right. So I guess, so here's the deal. So, I mean, I think in just all of us listening and watching you share your story, share the process that you've gone through, and even like how your health journey has even contributed and shaped the lens that you now see things through. Yeah. And how you translate that. I mean, you've got a gift. Yeah. And not just a gift, you've also got a skill that you've really developed. Because to be able to transition between ministry type things and all these different contents, you know, you've become a master curator.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a great way of putting it.
So the question I want to have, because here's the funny thing. So when you're going from ministry to big companies, all in kind of covering both of those ends of the, you know, the thing here, what has been some of the craziest stuff that you've been asked, or
what's the weirdest thing you've ever edited?
Okay, so you want to talk broad spectrum,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Going from, and I actually think the timeline of this, like, I think this probably was within a few weeks, but like I was kind of saying earlier, was like telling sensitive heart stories of people who have been like impacted like by war in another country, to then like having to like 180 my brain. I got this like medical analysis project through one of my agencies where it was on erectile dysfunction, and this is the weirdest. It was beautifully shot 6K Blackmagic raw footage of male genitalia in full, just full everything getting injected with the whatever it was.
No.
And I'm sitting here having to like cut all this footage together. And the request from the client was hilarious. They were like, because it was like an hour-long demo of like this guy getting his penis injected in just full 6K. And the client's request was wild. Like, they were like, can we cut this into a high-energy, engaging sizzle reel?
Sorry. Okay, first off, that should not be put into a sentence that is all joined together. Can we take that scene and make it high? There is no high energy. I am like cringing from just the thought.
Right? Like
okay. I picture you sitting in your office at 3 a.m. editing that.
Here's the deal. In your office. Okay, so once again, got to reiterate. This is a medical.
Yeah, it's a
video.
medical. So it's for medical purposes. Understandably, there's not. It's medical. Let's just really establish that.
Okay, but then here you are. So I know your office space.
Yeah.
Could you imagine someone like, hey Christian,
yeah, right. Well, and like what was actually really fun about this one is like I got to work on this project at one of the agencies that I work with. It was with them, and it's a really fun like team of like 15 people. So it was so much worse because I'm here and like all these people are walking in and they're like, what is going on?
I'm dying right now, man. Just the thought of this.
I'm like, it's just kind of those moments right in your career where you're sort of like, you're just sitting there like, the beginning of the movie, the freeze frame, bet you're wondering how I got here. Like, that's kind of like, I feel like that is like where this all starts, like the penis. And then like, let's go backwards to like, how did we get to this point? So just, and a little bit of a like moment of like, okay, let's maybe take a bit of a step back and potentially refocus on like where I really want to be in the type of content that I want to be working on. But thankful for it all. Like, and but it's just stuff like that where you're just like, wow, this is, you kind of never know what you're going to get in this space. And like, I guess kind of on a slightly more serious note with that, right? Where it's like, yeah, it's an hour-long medical demo that these people want an engaging sizzle reel for, because what they wanted to do is they actually wanted to send that to specific medical professionals in the space. They were showing a very kind of cutting edge surgical procedure, if you would call it that. So that's where they were like, and then the sizzle reel actually was the purpose it had to serve was showing this penis injection demo, while 2, weaving in the company as a whole as like, yo, this is our company. Like, this is what, like, we do a lot of these really interesting demos / like, here's one of them / like, can you communicate this all in 60 seconds? So it actually was like, it was actually one of my more challenging, incredibly really complex because the source footage was so, you called it earlier, as grotesque as it was, really boring. All these lockdown shots of a medical procedure. And it's like, there's no way to make that interesting. And I think I had like a day and a half to turn the editor around because like they had tried some other stuff that was just not working. And it really kind of came down to like, Christian, we need you to make this work. We need you to make this engaging. So what I ended up actually doing was I built a bunch of motion graphics, like of kind of different elements of like what the company does. And then found a really punchy boom, 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 boom track, was able cut to penis, cut to motion design of like, yo, we do these services, cut back to wiener, cut back to other B-roll, end with logo.
Yeah, that's
and it
crazy.
Actually like was a really engaging edit. And I think a fun testament to like, again, a good edit made rough. I don't want to say rough. It was shot beautifully. Made uninteresting source footage really engaging and interesting. And the client saw it and they were like, yo, we would actually like to take this like to our national channels, like, cause it was like so well done. It was like, yeah, because the cut was good, you know? And again, that just like, I know I'm biased.
Yeah.
But it just shows the importance of like knowing what you're doing with like, you can argue like any footage you can make work if you know what you're doing. And I think that is probably the most like valuable skill that you can have. Yeah.
So I would say then, I mean, that's just still mind blowing. Like to think about because here's the deal: there's a message that needs to be communicated. Yeah. And no matter what, how you package it.
Yep.
I mean, that still falls into your hands as the curator, as a person who's editing. Yep. The last question I had, because you know, and when you're thinking about the spectrum of clients and people that you get to partner with and work with, you know, you're going to come across some who maybe aren't highly technical or aren't highly creative. And so like you had said, yeah, they send me like, this is what they're wanting, but you know, the majority of the time you end up just going because you are able to empathize or feel or understand, oh, this is the direction they're going. But we all know as creatives, like there's not always one straight, like a straight path. Yes.
Never is.
But there's always many different directions you can kind of take.
Yeah.
So how do you, as the editor, as the person who is the gatekeeper per se, how do you approach someone who has said, hey, like, this is what I've done, and then you give it to them, but then how do you sell it? Like, how do you communicate it so that they're able to understand? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, and to be perfectly honest, this is something that I've been in this space for 10 years. I would say probably really kind of since I started my post-production company 3 years ago. Mind you, when I started my post-production company, that was where I reached the point where I realized, like, I think I'm at a skill level where I can take this on my own. Yeah. Right. So, but mind you, there were 7 years of intense building and explicit instruction following and explicit coloring within the lines that happened before I started my production company in 2020. So to answer your question is, you have to grow your skill. There's a phrase somewhere I've heard in terms of art where it's like, you know, something along the lines of like, you need to know the rules before you break the rules. Like you can't just go in hot breaking the rules. You're going to get in a lot of trouble. Yeah. And I would argue that you can only break the rules once you've developed a pretty good skill set, because at that point, you know yourself so well, and you've seen enough of this to where you know what someone is asking for, right? So my answer to that would be like, be in the space that you want to be in for a certain amount of time. There's the whole 10,000 hour rule of like mastery to something. Like I'm a firm believer in that. And I know that's kind of a controversial, you know, Malcolm Gladwell take, but I mean, there's something about like I said, like I was employed at places for 7 years before 10 years. I've been, you know, was basically 2013, no, 7. I'm getting hung up on the math. At least I know there's the minimum number was 7 for me before I like branched out and did my thing. That was 7 years full-time working for other people, learning the ropes, learning what worked and didn't, before I kind of started branching out on my own and getting more flexible with rule breaking. Yeah. And I guess my my hot take would be like, I would argue that I often know you better than you know you, because I've been in the space so much longer than you. Yeah. And what you are asking for is great, but it's kind of like, yo, I'm going to now put my twist on this from these years of experience that I have. What do you think of this? And 95% of the time, client is going, whoa, like, we really like this. Like really within the past year and a half, 2, the integrity of my version 1s that I've been shipping have been, for the most part, 90% unchanged, which I think is like pretty crazy. Like to be able to like ship a V1 and like at most I'm getting swap these shots or like take this part and move it here, but not these crazy like, yo, let's restructure this whole thing. Because
that's amazing.
Like, because it's where I'm at, you know, and that's been the result of years and years of,
I love that.
You know, training and learning. So Yeah, know the rules before you break them. And I think I would argue the best way to know the rules is be patient and spend time learning them as much as we all want to like learning the why, as much as we would just all love to just burst through the doors doing our own thing. You can't. Cinematography, you know, audio, all of that. You will feel yourself reach that point of mastery. And then with that comes a confidence to know that you can then step in and start calling the shots yourself. But that comes from a space of patience and being in a space for a certain amount of time. So
love it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's so awesome. Cool.
Man, this guy's crazy.
Dude, Christian, thanks, man. This has been so good. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Actually, could I just jump on one more thing too from
go
for it. Because like you guys have me going now. Like
let's go. That's good.
There's a lot you're gonna have to edit out of this. But yeah, so I think like editing is kind of like a beast of a space to be in. And again, I would argue like with any form of storytelling, like any space that you're in on the film production spectrum, like edit for a while, right? I think I'm kind of challenging myself right now. I'm actually in the early stages of writing a feature-length film. Okay. And this is the first time that I've been in the feature scripted narrative space actually in 10 years. Like I used to do this a lot in high school with friends. We would write scripts, we would shoot things. And then I launched into just a career for 10 years. And now I've just kind of been feeling that draw to that space again. But what's been wild to watch is now I am approaching writing a script with 10 years of editing under my belt. And it is entirely 180'd the way that I construct a narrative. Editing is a subtractive process, right? Where you are starting with a lot and you are pulling things out of it. You are making it cohesive and coherent, and then you are delivering something that from a massive bucket of content that has been slimmed down and now works for a specific purpose. Writing is additive, right? You are starting with nothing and reversing into a large bucket of things almost. It's like pouring water into a bucket is writing, and editing is pouring water out of the bucket, right? Yeah. So what I've found, and obviously I haven't gotten to the screenplay yet. Like I'm in the, I'm just in the like pre-screenplay mode. And like, I'm such an editor, right? Because I use this online platform called Miro, which is just this like big, just like online whiteboard tool. Yep. And I literally drew a massive line that like literally looks like a timeline. And there's about 500 sticky notes of concepts that I all put in a big footage bin of dialogue and scenes and everything. And I am literally just putting it all onto the timeline, restructuring, building out how I want this thing to flow as if I am editing in reverse to build my narrative. And I would argue that it like, at least from like the way that I've paced it out, like I think it's like a very well-paced, well-constructed narrative because I'm building it as a video editor for 10 years, not just kind of like, oh, I want to tell this story. So I say all that, right, in the sense of like, and this is additive, right? So what I did is I learned from being in post what I'm pulling out and what doesn't work and what generally does not work. And I am now building a narrative from what all the good that I have found from editing in this other form of storytelling, right? So I say all that to say, like, it's kind of crazy how foundational post-production is to all other forms of storytelling. Yeah. And I get so excited when I see editor directors because it's so incredibly rare, but they are highly technical, highly talented people. The Most common, the two biggest names I can think of off the top of my head is James Cameron. He's an editor director, highly technical dude. Homeboy built his own submarine and went down to the Titanic 30 times. Like there's a certain level of like technical genius and insanity with that. Yeah. To where I think that's where he is able to comfortably step into the post-production space. Like Cameron laid, from what I understand, like he laid the foundation for Titanic in the cutting room, which is wild considering like a director at his scale. The other one, Steven Soderbergh, the guy who did Oceans, he was one of the first directors. He shot Contagion on the Red One when it was still in like pre-production phase. Like this guy is always, and then he shot a movie called Unsane on like an iPhone 8, which like, so he's again, this highly technical dude who's like, oh, I'm going to like push the envelope with camera technology. And he cuts all of his own stuff, which I'm like, that makes so much sense. Like, of course, a guy who's like shooting things on weird experimental cameras is wanting to cut his own stuff, right? And then the most recent, I saw, because it's Halloween time, I saw Saw 10 like 2 weeks ago. And I let out the biggest yell during the end credits because I saw that the director was also the editor, and everyone was probably like, who is this guy? Like, what is this dude's deal? And I was like, yes, let's go. And then I looked the guy up after. So actually the guy who cut the original Saw in 2004 when it was a $700,000 indie film, years later is now cutting the 10th installment of the film and directing it.
Wasn't it like just a group of like, wasn't like a high school project or something?
So like, and that's a whole other podcast, but I could get into like what I love about the original Saw so much, because it was a college student. His name was James Wan. Him and his partner, they wrote this feature film called Saw. They shot a 10-minute short film of one of the scenes from the movie for $0. They shopped it around Hollywood. Lionsgate picked it up. They said, here, we'll give you $700K, shoot the feature, which was nothing. Right. And you hear them talk about just how strapped they even felt with that budget. And it kicked off a phenomenon of, to this point, 10 films across and mind you, the way that it all started, right? Like a college student with intense vision that made it work and made it happen, like I think is so cool. And that's where like really the original Saw does hold such a special place in my heart as someone with no nepotism. James Wan had no connections. He was an Australian film student who flew to the US with this creepy doll and was like, we're going to make something, right? So what's cool is like they cut the first Saw in their apartment with no money. And I just think it's so cool where it's like you see this, the guy who cut the original film, and James Wan has gone on to direct, you know, massive horror films. He just did Aquaman, all that. Like his career launched in his way. But this editor then went on to do editorial on a lot of other big projects. And now he's directing the 10th installment of this franchise. And I would argue, like, again, like I can't just sit here and be like, go out and watch the Saws because it's Saw. But it definitely was the most cohesive narrative and the tightest, most balanced. Wow. The first half of the film was kind of the soap opera focusing on like the motives of the killer. And then it goes into like all the other stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is clearly like, I don't know how to explain it, but you can just tell that it was made by somebody who understands story, right? And sure enough, you get to the end credits and you're like, oh yeah, the guy who directed this cut this. And you know that he was planning every single shot. You know that he was doing every second he spent of you know, was through the lens of, I'm the one cutting this, therefore I'm going to be extra attentive to the story. And it's showing. It's currently the most successful out of all of the films in that franchise. So I say all that to say, like, it all comes back to editing. And I know that I'm biased, and you can bring a cinematographer on here and he'll probably be like, it all comes back to DPing. But I'm gonna like really argue that it doesn't. Yeah. Because like nothing pulls you out of something faster and quicker one, then bad audio. Like that's the number one. Like you're like that. But then two, something that just isn't paced well, you know, or where you're like, was that 3 hours long? And you're like, no, it was an hour and a half. And you're like, oh yeah, just because this was just such a poorly constructed, poorly cut narrative that like, so again, you're the gatekeeper, right?
Yeah.
You can make stuff that even had no foresight work if you know what you're doing. You can go in and write a feature film, direct a feature film through the lens of skills that you learned in post, and really step into all of these other fields because you're the gatekeeper, you're the assembler. It takes an incredible amount of mental energy to be able to take incoherent, arbitrary concepts and pull those in together that make something work. Wow. And I just think that's a really important skill set to, even if you're like, screw film production, I'm going to go be an airline pilot. Like, I still think there's really solid skills that you're going to learn from that. And I'm not like, this isn't even touching on the people element, right? The interpersonal, like I said, empathy, understanding human psyche, and all of that. So, that's my last take.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
No, so good. Like honestly, there's just a lot of great things that you've mentioned and we've been able to talk about today. I love it.
Yeah,
love it.
It's been incredible, dude.
Thank you so much.
You have so much wisdom in this space. Like people need to hear this. Christian does not talk online ever, and he should.
Yeah.
So
maybe this will kick it off. Who knows? You know?
That's why I dragged him here. But dude, seriously, like there's so much good insight and just lots of laughs and different things that I feel like there's people out there who are gonna watch this and they're gonna be like, dang, maybe I do have that creative heart and that desire and that mindset. I've just never really stepped into it. And I feel like you help out with like kind of being that bias for video editing. Hey, try this out. Right. Because it really does boost your creative mind in all kinds of different ways. But that's my favorite, video editing, obviously. I've been doing it for almost as long as you. But obviously I wasn't good because I was younger, but I count the old, like the iMovie days and and everything. So
and like Zach, like I've loved like Zach and I have like really started working together kind of the past few months, which stinks because like we've been in proximity for a year. Right. And I'm like, why is it now that we're just starting to like work together? And like beyond working together, like some of my favorite moments with you have just been like where we were at like Chili's the other day, like talking about like random ideas for like products and like startup ideas and like those kind of thing, like was so life-giving. Right. So, you know, I guess to also kind of say like, don't get so hung up on the thing at hand. Like surround yourself with cool people that you can just like kind of shoot the breeze with and, you know, talk fun stuff with. Cause like, that's the most important, right? And like community, I cannot stress the importance of community. And again, like it gets so much sweeter as like a follower of Jesus, right? Because it's like being a Christian is like community on steroids. Cause it's like, oh, like not only like do we get to be surrounded by like-minded people who think like us, like we get to be surrounded by like-minded people who like believe that like the creator of the universe is like fully orchestrating their creative destiny. And I cannot think of like a cooler place to not only be as an individual, right, but with like other people like you guys, like on this journey. So let's go have a coffee soon and talk.
Absolutely.
You know,
you're a Christian and you're Christian.
Hey, I can't escape the name. So, you know, I'm stuck with it.
Thank you so much, guys. Once again, leave us some thoughts in the comments and we look forward to the next episode that we'll bring to you guys. But Christian, once again, dude, so great to have you here. And really just thanks for opening up and helping us to understand one of the many facets, but the why behind it and really what value it really brings. And so we appreciate you, man.
And why it's the best.
Yes, and why it's the best.
The More Creative Podcast.
See you guys.